Hi, and welcome to Recruiter Fuel. My name is David Budaszewski. I'm a videographer here at Qualigence International. And what Recruiter Fuel is kind of a forum for us to talk about issues facing recruiters nowadays as the landscape is constantly changing. I'm here with Melissa McLean,
Hi.
our delivery expert here, to talk about problems with hiring for remote hybrid. Now, this seems to be like a big thing as, a lot of companies are, doing RTO, but many more are even seeing the benefits of hiring outside of just their general vicinity. And well, what is a couple things that someone should consider when determining whether or not a job can be done remote or on-site?
I think anytime you're considering or need to consider a remote position, you have to think about what is that person's interaction day to day and in their job responsibilities, right? Because if it's at a plant and they need to be seen and being on the plant floor and interacting with folks there, they obviously probably not the best idea to work remote.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to
Yeah.
work on a machine when
Exactly.
you're across the
Exactly.
country.
Yeah, exactly. So you just have to consider really what is this job and what is the expectation that I have of this person coming into this role. And if it doesn't make sense to have them not present on site, then that's probably something that you're going to have to maybe think about a hybrid situation.
What are some things to look for specifically in a candidate when you are hiring for a remote role or hybrid role? Because obviously, I feel like it's one of those things where certain people like certain things.
Yeah.
Some certain people like to be around other people, and certain people don't. They want to,
Sure.
work in their home kind of thing. So what's something to sort of look out for?
Sure. The easiest thing is if they're indicating that they're interested in remote on LinkedIn, but that doesn't necessarily happen often. And we're usually recruiting passive candidates, so they're not actively out in the job market. So you really have to understand what's important to the candidate, what they're currently doing, and be forthright with, would you be open to this if it is a hybrid situation, or they do require you to come in 5 days a week, or are you fully remote only, and find out why is that. Maybe they moved and can't come in, not close to the office, and relo is not an option for them due to family reasons or whatever. So you have to understand what is actually motivating them wanting to be fully remote. And you have to know your company culture to kind of talk to them about that. And if that's a big part of why you have people come into the office, you need to be able to explain that and talk through that with a candidate, of why that's important for not just the role, but the company as a whole.
Yeah, I feel like communication is going to be a key part in
Yeah.
whether or not you hire somebody in that position. Sometimes people have trouble communicating in text or sending an email or whatever, whereas they're more communicative to each other, face-to-face kind of stuff.
And if
So,
the whole team is on site and they're working in a room like this
Yeah.
and they're collaborating and writing on the whiteboard and all that stuff, is that going to be difficult for somebody working fully remote?
So how different, I mean, because I was actually talking to one of our coworkers the other day about how the hiring process has sort of changed when it comes to this specifically. Because I remember when, getting my first job, one of the big things, you go in there, you talk to somebody, and you get a firm handshake saying you got the job.
Yeah.
So how is the process different from, hiring that remote worker versus, someone on site? And what are some things you should probably look out for?
Good question. I think when we're talking to clients, a lot of times if it is a remote role, if there's any way to bring that person on site for their final interview, we do ask about that because you do want them to see the
Yeah.
headquarters if they can, right? If they can bring somebody in, totally understand if you can't because that can get expensive if
Oh,
you're
for sure,
hiring quite
yeah.
a bit. So if that's not the case, you really have to make sure people are doing video interviews, right? You want to be able to at least see people versus a conference call or just a phone call. That's the biggest piece. If you can't physically bring them in for at least a final interview, you need to have everybody visible on a screen.
Yeah.
So, because that way the person wants to know the team that they're working with and who they'll be interacting with every day. And it's hard to pick that up on the phone.
I think having being in person somewhere, I think gives you a good idea of the culture and sort of what the expectations are.
Yeah.
Just from being there and seeing everything going on, because then you get that, it just So it's just je ne sais quoi. You just
Yeah.
sort of feel it,
Yeah,
like, oh,
exactly.
this is the company I want to work for, or,
Yeah.
I think this is gonna work for me.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's funny you brought up video interviews, I should
Hmm.
say, because something I've been seeing a lot of, and there's a lot of distaste for on the other side of this, are these pre-packaged video interviews, right? So like you
Yeah.
get a link to just go take these like one-time videos of yourself in
Hmm.
an interview.
Yeah.
Do you think that's helpful for that process, or do you really want a more hands-on approach when you're talking to someone like that?
There are certain roles where I feel like that video clip is super important. Like if it's a high volume role and you're recruiting for hundreds of openings, even like
Mm,
50, that's a lot for a recruiter to go through. And if you have 1,000 applicants, how do you get through them all?
yeah, it's
So
true.
that type of stuff actually does help with efficiency and to kind of dwindle down, a large candidate pool, and make it easier for the recruiter to kind of take those top candidates and then interview them after that.
Yeah, well, makes sense. Yeah, if
Yeah,
you have 1,000 candidates going after one role, especially because it's remote, so
right.
anybody can apply to it,
Exactly.
then you kind of want to funnel
Narrow
that down
down.
as much as
Yeah.
you can.
Because that takes a lot of time to go through
Yeah, when you're doing
a
it
ton
right,
of
yeah, it does.
resumes.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
So it's nice to have the help of like, how do I get this to like a smaller group? And then I can go from there. And then I can have my normal recruiting interview conversations with the
hopefully,
candidate. Yes.
hopefully, yeah.
Hopefully. Yes.
When you're casting a wide net, I mean, we're from the Midwest,
Hmm.
right? We have a certain way we kind of do
Yeah.
things. We have a certain
Sure.
sort of lingo, all the
Sure.
stuff. Like, so when a place in California is sending out something, maybe it doesn't really speak to me as much as something from my local place.
Yeah.
So how do you sort of bridge that, as it were? Sort of,
It's a good question. I don't know the right answer for that because I do feel like if it is a remote role, like you said, and it's open to everybody, you're going to kind of have to make a general message, right? Because you don't want to exclude people like you're talking about from the Midwest versus the East Coast versus the South, So if you're really wanting to capture a general audience, you're going to have to make the message a little bit more general
yeah,
and not focus on where it's at, right? In California, you should probably focus on the team, the company culture as a whole versus, oh, if you live here in California, you know. Now, if you're looking to get people to relo, that's a lot different because you're going to want to focus on the location and like the benefits of being there and all the things that you're close to and all of that. That's a different sell.
it seems like that's sort of a message you want to be able
Yeah.
to say for yourself if you're this way or that way and attract as many candidates as you can. So.
Yes. Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to say about, hiring towards remote hybrid? Is there anything that we haven't brought up that maybe?
Um, no, I would just say to people, as a recruiter, always keep an open mind in terms of don't automatically think somebody might not be interested in one versus the other. And, as we're working with clients, we make it a point to, on our weekly update calls, to discuss what we're hearing in the market. And we've had clients shift their minds before of where they thought maybe it was going to no fully remote, but then maybe they change it to hybrid because they're seeing that there's not a lot of talent in this area and we can't relocate somebody, so we have to compromise. So I think just looking at what you have and making sure that you're just having those conversations with people to then bring back data to the company, whoever the business is, to say, this is what the market's saying. Is there any way we can change this?
Mhm.
And 9 times out of 10, they do, because they want good talent for their office. So they're willing to say, you know what, originally we thought this was going to be fully remote or fully in the office. That's not going to work. We're willing to do hybrid or we're willing to do fully remote. And we didn't think we were going to,
Yeah, it's one of
you
those
know?
things, it's you sometimes you kind of got to work backward from your company culture and say, we can make this fit, because it's gonna get us better candidates in the long run. So why don't we fit this in there instead of trying to fit that
Yeah.
into there kind of thing. So
Yeah. And again, you just have to make sure that it aligns with the role responsibilities and it makes sense for the role. There are just
yeah,
some roles that can't do remote work, and that's okay. But you just have to make sure, and most people in those industries and in those positions, like fully understand that the role isn't going to be remote.
Well, that's well, something to think about.
Yeah.
It's do what's best for you. Is
Yes.
what's important.
Yes,
So,
exactly.
well, I want to thank you for joining me today.
Yeah.
And
Thanks for
learned a
having
lot.
me. It's
Yeah.
good to be back.
Great to be back, guys.